Hi, welcome back to ABA-ish. I'm Dr. Billy Retzloff, and today we're going to be going into a little bit more detail about our caregiver energy continuum. If you haven't watched the video I made that gives an overview of caregiver energy use, I recommend you go watch that one first before you dig into this one. But as a quick reminder, in that video, what we talked a ton about is that if we have a behavior we want to see more of from our kid, maybe this is independent play, helping around the house, good listening or compliance, kindness, using their manners, whatever it is that we want to see more of, we as the caregiver should be giving that behavior a ton of energy. On the flip side, if there's a behavior we want to see less of, maybe this is whining or using inappropriate language, not listening, leaving items out, those kind of things, we want to give that as little of energy as possible. So the question becomes, what is a high energy response? What does that look like? Overall, a high energy response is anything that requires a relatively large amount of a caregiver's energy. And energy might be effort, time, resources, attention, focus, any of those things. So some really great examples of positive ways we can give high energy responses are things like high fives, having conversations with our kids, doing a gesture or a thumbs up, giving them recognition or praise, narrating what they're doing, playing with them. There's tons and tons of ways that we can give kids lots of energy. There are also negative examples of this. This might be things like scolding or lecturing, repeated prompting, yelling. Sometimes I see this when people are trying to get their kids to apologize for something, where it's taking a ton of energy. They're like arguing back and forth with them about why they need to and what it means and how it's going to happen. That's actually a high energy response, right? It's a lot of your time, your effort, your stamina as a caregiver trying to get that response from the kid. Now, we don't want these negative examples of high energy responses. And that's because we know anytime we give a high energy response, it makes it more likely that that behavior is going to happen. So these negative examples would just make it more likely that a bad behavior is going to happen. So we're going to go ahead and ignore those now moving forward. But I want to make sure that you know high energy doesn't correlate with positive. You can have a positive and negative example of high energy. We just want to make sure we're sticking to those positives. So here's a pretty decent list, but again, it can really be anything that would be high energy. High fives, hugs, thumbs up, having a special gesture. So my daughter and I, let's see how I do this. We do this to each other a lot. It means I love you. And so if she's like across the way doing something, I can reach out my hand and show her I love you, and she'll usually do it back. And that's a high energy response. It takes all of my focus. I have to go in and pay attention to her, get her attention. It's easy to do, it's quick, but it's still a higher energy response. Providing recognition, so really recognizing your kids' strengths and talents and hard work and dedication, that's super important, as well as praising their really specific behavior. And, if you can praise in a way that also ties to some sort of like behavior characteristic, that's amazing. So something like, hey, I can see that you are letting your brother share some of your snack. I think that that is such a kind thing for you to do as a big sister. Singing, dancing, playing together when you're not on your phone, but you're actually engaging with the kid, that's really high energy. Having a conversation, maybe cooking together, having ice cream, smiling, laughing, making silly faces, patting your kid on the back or giving them back scratches, expressing your genuine gratitude, thanking them for what they're doing. Narrating is something that we do a lot with younger kids where we just kind of describe what they're doing as they're doing it. And this shows them that you're focused on them, you're paying attention, you see what's happening. Reflection, that's kind of saying back to the kid what they've already told you. So, if your child is kind of complaining about something that happened at school, reflecting would maybe sound something like, okay, so what I hear is that your teacher really sprung this test on you and you didn't feel like it was fair because you didn't have a chance to prepare. Is that right? That would be reflecting. You're not judging, you're not making some sort of value statement, you're just really repeating back to them what they said. And again, that's showing that you're giving them that time, that focus, that attention, because you wouldn't be able to repeat back to them if you didn't listen to them in the first place. And then validating is kind of like a step forward. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to agree with what they're saying, but saying something like, I can see why that would be frustrating, or I can see how that would be challenging for you. And so validating is that next step forward of, recognizing that you understand their emotions, you get where they're coming from. Again, you don't always have to agree with them, but it's the fact of saying, like, it's valid that you feel this way. I understand it's okay that you feel that way. Okay, so that's a high energy response. Then the opposite side is a low energy response. So that would be anything that just takes a small amount of our caregiver energy. Again, energy can be effort, time, resources, attention, focus, all of those things. So for me, the best low energy response, and remember, we're going to do this in response to things that we don't want more of, is to have a known response. What that means is it's something that you and your kid have talked about when they are calm and regulated and have practiced together, and you and they know what it means when you say it. So, for example, my kids are pretty young right now, so one of our known responses is a calming break. Usually, what I'll do is I'll prompt them that they can have a choice. Do they want to take a calming break or do they feel okay? That's my kind of like, hey, I'm giving you a warning. This isn't going so great. And then if they are to the point where I, as the parent, am deciding we need to do a calming break, then I tell them this is a no choice, mom decided calming break. So my kids know what that looks like. Usually it's that they go to a different space. It's about a couple minutes. I usually offer them calming strategies. So deep breathing, fidgets. My daughter really likes music when she's calming. So that's our known response. And the reason known responses make the best low energy responses is because you shouldn't be explaining or arguing or going back and forth with them at this point. We know what this consequence is. We know what this response means. We've practiced it as a team. And so I can be confident just saying, it's time to take your mom decided calming break. And I don't have to argue back and forth when she's like, but why would, how about this? How about that? Nope. This is what we're doing right now. And if you can't do it on your own, then I will help you do it. And so those known responses let us stay lower energy because we don't feel that need to explain and to work through it with them because we've practiced that ahead of time. And I can't tell you how important that is. In order for it to really be low energy, you and your kid have to have it down. You have to be able to offer that response without a lot of emotion or getting yourself escalated because that's only going to escalate them further. And it's just, this is what we're doing right now. And we all know of that response. Um, so there are also times that you can do a low energy response that's in response to a good behavior, and we don't want to do that, right? But that might be something like if you make a non-specific comment. So I'm definitely guilty of this sometimes where my daughter, will tell me a story and I'm not paying great attention. And then I say something like, oh yeah, okay, that sounds good. And she's like, Mom, did you hear my story? Anything where I'm not actually giving her that energy. I'm not showing her that I was listening and I was focused because it's so non-specific. The same with like a disengaged comment of like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. You're not giving time and energy. You're just kind of blowing it off. Those are non-specific or disengaged comments and they're low energy. And we do sometimes accidentally do those in response to behavior we want to see more of. But what we really want to be using our low energy responses for is those behaviors we want to see less of. So that could be something like a redirection or a calming break. So some examples of good low energy responses that I want you guys to be trying to use with your kids when they engage in inappropriate behavior is a nonverbal redirection. So this could be something like stepping in between your kid and whatever thing they're doing that isn't appropriate. It could be removing one item and showing them another item. So I have a really young kid. He's about a year and a half, and I do this with him a ton. If he's kind of being inappropriate with something, I don't actually talk about what I'm doing, and instead I just maybe remove that item from him and hand him something different. That would be a nonverbal redirection. Maybe I even pick him up and I move him to a different area if the area that he is in, he's not behaving safely or appropriately in. We can also use verbal redirection. So this would be like telling them to go do something else. Why don't we find X? Why don't we go do some bubbles? Why don't you, help me cook dinner, whatever it may be. This is a verbal redirection where I'm not necessarily stating what the problem is, because that just draws attention and energy to the problem. But instead, I'm just redirecting them to something else, something better. Another option could be to give a prompt or a warning. And so this is something, again, it should be known. You should have practiced ahead of time of what does it sound like. For my daughter, I'll usually say something like, hey, this is your warning. That's not a safe way to play. If you keep playing like that, we'll do a calming break. So giving them that kind of chance to correct their behavior that one time. Again, make sure it's known. And then the other key to this is to make sure that you always follow through with what that if is, right? So if I tell my daughter, if we keep playing that way, we're going to take a calming break, and she keeps playing that way, I need to actually have her do a calming break then. So don't give a warning or a prompt if you don't think that you can follow through. If you know that you're not in a place to stop everything and give your child a calming break, it's not a good time to offer this, because what they'll learn then is that, hey, if mom says this, it's kind of like a hit or miss. It's always worth it to test it. So I want to make sure if I give them a warning that I follow through with that warning. We've already talked about some calming breaks. Card grounding is another great option. So this is usually for older kids. And it's a situation where you give them, when they break a rule, you usually give them a warning first. And then if they still are continuing to break the rule, you give them a card and they're grounded until they complete what's on the card. So the card might be a chore. I like to do cards that also have like regulation strategies or restitution strategies on them. At some point, I'll probably make a video that really goes through card grounding in depth, so you can check that out whenever it exists. And then the other option could be like a known loss of privilege. So if you have an older kid who maybe is driving and they're using your car in a set way, you may have sat down and talked with them about what the contingencies are, what the rules are for having that car. So an example could be, you get to use the car on Friday nights if you completed your homework every night of the week without fighting. And so on the day where they start fighting you on the homework and they don't complete it, you can easily just say, that means no card on Friday, right? You don't have to have a big conversation about it. You're not going to fight back and forth with them because it's a known loss of privilege. All right, so super quick. The purpose of this video was to really highlight what those low and high energy responses can be. So if you remember, low energy means we're going to get less behavior from the kid. So less likely they're going to do a behavior if you respond to it with a low energy response. Known responses make our best low energy responses. So if you can practice, decide as a family, what are our consequences? Practice them yourself, practice them with your kid, and then implement them consistently every time you say you're going to do it. High energy responses are the ones that are going to get us more behavior. So if our kids are doing things that we love and want to see more of, we want to give them those high energy responses. We want to make sure that we're genuine and acting like our normal self in them. So feel comfortable, find the thing that works for you and your family, but as much high energy as you can give, the better. The main thing I want you guys to remember is that as caregivers, we always have the choice to be intentional with our energy. It can be really hard to be a caregiver, but you get to decide how you react. And if you can react intentionally, keeping low energy when their kids are doing something they shouldn't be, and challenging yourself to find as many opportunities as possible to have high energy because your kids are doing something that you love, is absolutely going to help transform how your kid behaves and also how you feel about things. Thanks so much for listening. Remember, if you want to support me, you can always subscribe to my channel. And there's always the option to add, to submit a question, a topic, something you want to hear me talk about in the show notes. Have a great day.